The Leafs are in town, which could mean embarrassment. I think it might actually be a good night. I'll explain why I'm allowing myself to get a little hopeful today on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, and thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast. And for many of you making us your first listen every day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can check us out on our YouTube channel where you can watch the show. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Keep the season rolling with some big returns on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Just in time for college football playoff and all the NFL action this weekend, too. It's going to be a great sports weekend. And it starts with Sabres Leafs. If you can get yourself excited for this game. If not, I've got a couple of reasons to be optimistic that kind of go beyond the lineup a little bit, but also do include some points about what we're going to see in the Sabres lineup for tonight, what we're going to see on the ice, what we're going to see in the building. A lot to get to on today's show, as this team now is on day 20. Day 27. Thought I didn't update the counter. Day 27 since the last Buffalo Sabres win. We are nearing 30. We are nearing a full month since they have won a hockey game. If they do not win tonight, considering their last win was on November 23rd, the Sabres will only have one more opportunity to win without it being a month apart between wins. They'll play tomorrow night in Boston, which in the past has sounded like the most daunting task imaginable. This year, little more gettable, but you'd be playing the second of a back-to-back, so doesn't get too easy. And Boston, even though they have not looked nearly as good this year as they have in the past, they have won a little bit more recently. 6 of their last 10. They're up to that number 1 spot in the Eastern wildcard position, but still not having a very good year. So there's that. A lot to get to, though, on today's show. If you'd like to become a Locked On Sabres Text Club subscriber, you could do that by heading over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. You could sign up there, give you all the injury updates, some banter during games. If the Sabres were ever to make a trade or a firing, which I know is rare these days, you'll hear about it first from us. On the Text Club today, I got an interesting question that I wanted to share on today's episode. One listener wrote in, is it possible that the Sabres have not fired Kevyn Adams yet because of the holidays? And it's not something that I've necessarily considered yet until this question was asked. I don't want to definitively say no, though. Like, I know sports is a cold business sometimes, and you got to make decisions. That's how billionaires operate a lot. But I could see, maybe not even because like you'd be a jerk by firing him around the holiday time. It would be more of, like, does Pegula have in his head right now, if this were how I was an owner, naturally, I think a lot of people might think this way. If you had a team and you owned a team and you were going through an 11-game losing streak, maybe you have a date in your head or a week in your head where you say to yourself, okay, if they haven't won by blank, and that answer could be Christmas, the New Year, whatever. If they haven't won by blank, then I'm going to fire him. That's possible. You can only know that if you could crawl into the head of Terry Pegula. So it's possible. It's possible, though, that they would wait until the holidays. And if they are still on this losing streak, then maybe we get it afterwards. Eventually, they have to, right? Like, there is a line in the sand. No? Like, they can't lose 30 games in a row and not fire Kevyn Adams, right? 40 games in a row. Let's call it 40. If you told me, okay, they would fire him before the 40th game. Okay, good. So we've got a line in the sand. Now let's work our way back. What's the number? Is it 30? Is it 25? Is it 20? Is it 17? Is it 15? Like, There is a number. We just don't know what it is because obviously they would not lose every game till the end of time and then never make a change. So anyways, let's get to tonight's action though. Let's get to what tonight means, some of the lineup stuff. We'll talk more about the statistical impact of Rasmus Dahlin returning to the lineup for the Buffalo Sabres tonight. We thought it was heading that direction, and it is happening. Lindy Ruff confirmed that Dahlin will play tonight. I've got some numbers coming up when we start getting into the nitty-gritty of the game to show you the impact or how the Sabres have really dropped off statistically since Dahlin's injury. If you remember, Dahlin, when he got hurt, it was in that Colorado game. Like if you were to pull up his game log, you would see, oh, he played in that Colorado game. That's when everything got real bad, right? He got injured before they blew the lead. He got injured early on in the third period when the Sabres were winning 4-1. And, you know, you could play the what if game. What if he doesn't get hurt? Maybe they don't blow that lead and maybe they don't go on this losing streak. He is one of their most important players. So it's not like the biggest leap in the world to say that. But I got more numbers and a little bit more in-depth on Dahlin coming up in a little bit. But I want to start today with really what the night's going to be like, what the atmosphere is going to be like between these two hockey teams, because the expectation, I think, is that you are going to see 90% Toronto Maple Leaf fans in this building at KeyBank Center on Friday night. I do not know what the record is. I looked. It's hard to find. It's one of those like records where you just kind of have to guess at what the record would be. What would the record be in all sports for the most away fans on the road in an opposing team's building? Like the Bills. Sometimes you could get numbers like that. Like when they go to LA, it's 46% of the crowd. Or when we all went to Tennessee one year, it was like 52% of the crowd. Like these ticket estimations. Like what's that number? Because I want to say that tonight's game could set whatever that record would be. That is probably impossible to know. 90% Leaf fans would not surprise me in the slightest. In fact, the thing that would be most surprising to me is if there was any kind of showing from Sabre fans. There's no reason, right? They have not given Sabre fans any reason to show up to this game and not get a little extra money for their tickets if they're looking to do it, or if they've got family in for the holidays and they'd rather do something else than go down to the arena for a team that's on an 11-game losing streak and be in the minority. I tend to like games like this, though. Like, it is embarrassing, no doubt. And the Sabres should feel embarrassed by what happens to their building when they host Toronto. It's pathetic. It's sad. But here's my standpoint on it. I am so starving. Hockey is my favorite sport. Like, I love football. I love the Bills. Hockey is my favorite sport. And what I miss more than anything about hockey is going to a National Hockey League game and getting a crazy atmosphere, getting a loud environment, getting chants, getting reaction to missed calls, chanting at the ref, whatever it is, chanting at the opposing goaltender. All of that was present with the Sabres in 05, 06, and 06, 07. It's just so long gone. I mean, it's like a bygone era that, like, it's not even in HD. You want to go back and look at the highlights of crowds like that. Toronto, once or twice a year, however often they get into town, is a glimpse of what it can be like in that building. They're chanting for the wrong team, but just being in that building and hearing noise, that's how sad the state of this franchise is. I hate the Leafs more than anything. They're maybe my most hated team in the league. Their fans come in and take it over, and I look forward to going to those games. I look forward to it because I'm so starved of any energy in that library they call a hockey rink that I will accept the most annoying fans in the league, the fans of the team I hate more than anything. I will accept them in with open arms. Just please put some life into this place, even if it's the wrong kind. So I am excited to see what it looks like tonight. And also because, like, just the Sabres don't really deserve sympathy from anybody. So if they're the ones that are really feeling the shame and the embarrassment of it, then I think they deserve it. If fans start getting heat for it, like if I know I'm on edge about them right now. Like if I see national media, whoever, bloggers of other teams start going after Sabre fans for not filling up the building, which might happen, I'm going to be ready to go. In fact, maybe I should turn off social media for a couple of days so that doesn't happen. I'm expecting a huge crowd of Leaf fans. It's a Friday night game too, right? Like it's a Friday night game. The Leafs are hot. They've won 7 of 10. They're actually they're in first place in the division now, tied with Florida, but right now, I guess they've played fewer games, so they'd be ahead of them. And the Sabres are on their losing streak. So it kind of all adds up to, Leafs hype is high, Sabre hype is low. It's a Friday night, so Toronto fans could come down. They could stay the night even. I'm expecting it to be as heavy Leaf fans as we've ever seen. Now, I will say, though, this is why I feel a little optimistic about tonight's game. I think the Sabre players for a decade, really like when the Sabres got bad, Darcy announced suffering, they tanked, and Leaf fans started pouring into the building even more so than they did before. And since it really became not just, like when I remember as a kid when the Sabres were great was you would get a lot of Leaf fans, but it wasn't more than Sabre fans. Whenever you want to set a mark of Sabre fans started getting outnumbered by Leaf fans, Sabre players to me have always taken offense to that. They have always been fired up about that, played with a little bit of a pissed off attitude. If you remember Jack Eichel in those games, like I remember Eichel always being annoyed and being mad about Leaf fans taking over the building. He always sounded that way in press conferences. If you remember, Eichel once scored a goal at home against the Leafs, and he went over to the glass and he told 2 Leaf fans to sit down. Like Eichel would get that way, and I bet a lot of players get that way. And that's kind of represented in the record. Like it doesn't really make a lot of sense that in the Sabres playoff drought, in the last 13 years, they are 16-7-2 at home against the Toronto Maple Leafs. That is the best record the Sabres have against any Eastern Conference team. Any of them. And the Leafs have been good for 60% of the Sabres playoff drought. This is a good to great regular season. I mean, that's a great regular season team. That regular season team that has a phenomenal record, the Sabres have been destroying. They have dominated the Leafs during the playoff drought when they've been terrible and the Leafs have been great. The only teams, by the way, in the whole league that the Sabres have a better record at home against are Vegas and LA. And those like almost hardly even count because it's less than half the games. Like Vegas, it's like 5 games worth. LA, I think it's 10. And Toronto, it's 25. Like they play better against the Leafs than any other team in the league. Given the sample size, I feel like you can comfortably say that. And that shouldn't be like, it should be Columbus, right? A team that's terrible. It should be Ottawa, a team that's been bad for most of the drought. A team like Detroit, who's been bad for most of the drought. Like, no, it's one of the good teams. And maybe that's because Leaf fans come in and they actually do their team a disservice. Like Leaf fans probably thinking like, all right, cheap night. Leaf tickets are super expensive in Toronto. I can go down to Buffalo, drive an hour and a half, 2 hours down to QEW. I can get cheap tickets. I can go see my team play and take over the building and hopefully see them win. And in the last 13 years, they have only seen their team win 9 times. 9 times doing that. Because by going down there, they are maybe firing up the Sabres and getting them to play a little harder. And the Sabres then follow through with the wins. Last year, if you remember, there was more context to this game because of what had happened a couple of nights before. But last season, the Sabres were floundering in the middle of the year, and they had just been beaten by the Columbus Blue Jackets 9-4. The Sabres had lost to Arizona right before that last year, 2-0, who was a horrible team. They were not playing well. And the Sabres lost to Columbus 9-4. And then they played Toronto on that Thursday night. I was at that arena that night. And maybe not 90% Leaf fans, but probably 75%. Like it was mostly Leaf fans in attendance that night. and the Sabres destroyed them 9-3. And Leaf jerseys were being thrown on the ice. In fact, I know there was a Tavares jersey was thrown on the ice, and I think I know somebody that has that jersey. Like they were fuming. I remember back in the tank season in 2014-15 when the Sabres were like middle of the year, they were way at the bottom already. Like we knew they were chasing last place and they were bad. And the Sabres, actually, you know what? Maybe I'm looking now. It was a little earlier in the year than I thought. It was like mid-November. It was November 15th. So they were 4-13-2. But same thing. Like they were well on their way to being one of the worst teams of all time. 4-13-2. 3-13-2. Excuse me. That wasn't 4 was counting that game. And Toronto comes to town, and that's like a, half decent Toronto team. It's still Kessel and Dion Phaneuf. Like it was an okay team, but not a great team. But okay, way better than that Sabre team. And I remember tons of Leafs fans throwing things on the ice in anger that night. They lost 6-2. Sabres' best win of the season. 6-2 over, like, they always show up. They always show up, almost always, when the Leaf fans come to town. So that's what's leaving me a little bit optimistic about tonight. It's not just that. There's an on-ice reason, too, I feel more optimistic about tonight, although it's a little bit in question. Dahlin's back, but what are we getting from Dahlin? I got some numbers on the difference with him and without him in the lineup this year. Get to the lineups, and we'll preview tonight's game a little further coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks, I mean, for tonight's game, if you want to check out Tage Thompson, more or less than a point, or shots on goal for Alex Tuch, or maybe if you want on the other side, look at some of the Maple Leaf players, you could do that. PrizePicks, if you love sports, you're gonna love PrizePicks. The best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money, because whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they are giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas, and they're offering 2 free picks in December. When your picks hit, PrizePicks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Download the app today and check out all those options. It could be other teams too. Jack Hughes, more or less than 4 shots on goal for this weekend. Check it out. College football and NFL as well. PrizePicks. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL on the PrizePicks app. PrizePicks. Run your game. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, the Sabres and the Maple Leafs. 7 o'clock puck drop between these two teams. Did I see this right, by the way? I believe the Sabres are wearing black and red for tonight's game. I would have liked to see them do black and red in a game where there are actually going to be Sabre fans in attendance. But nonetheless, tonight's game, Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN Plus, by the way. So maybe there'll be a lot of other people watching this game too across the country. Although you have college football tonight, Notre Dame and Indiana. So not like, Sabres are going to wrestle ratings away from that. Anyways, here's another reason why I'm a little optimistic for today's game. It's not just the history, because the history shows the Sabres play their best when Toronto fans come to town. Rasmus Dahlin is going back into the lineup. By the way, Sam Lafferty is expected to return to the lineup as well. Obviously not the same impact. And Ryan McLeod is a game time decision. And we don't have line combinations right now because not everybody was on the ice for practice this morning. So we don't really have firm lineup stuff. That'll probably be right before puck drop, obviously, with the line rushes in the warm-up. But for Dahlin coming back, the biggest question I'm going to have is how much did he rush back? Because he has probably been playing banged up all season. He was injured, 90 seconds into the first practice of the season at training camp. And we found out a little later on that it was a back injury, which to me made sense because you didn't see him throwing the body around as much. You didn't see him making as many dynamic plays when he was getting in on rushes. He still played pretty well, but he was not playing at peak Rasmus Dahlin form. And it was a back injury, so that makes a little bit of sense. This injury he's had more recently, we don't know exactly what it is, but I would guess that it's related with being some sort of back thing or mid-body thing. How much is he rushing back? He had a long conversation with Lindy Ruff early this week at practice when he came out of the ice. It almost, I guess it's total speculation on my part, but almost felt like Lindy was surprised that he was coming out for practice, and they had a long talk. And I wonder if that talk was something like, are you sure you want to come back here? Are you like, I don't know about that. Like, are you sure you're good? How do you feel doing this? How do you feel doing that? Like, to me, it almost felt like a checking in, like, are you sure you're doing this? Because last year, Tage Thompson returned early from injury because the season was getting away from them, and he was not the same. He was not ready to come back, and it was very clear. It was evident. I don't know about Dahlin. Let's say, though, for sake of conversation, he is even 75% Rasmus Dahlin, which you could argue is what he was playing at before. He was not playing at his best. But even when not playing at his best, look at the difference. The Sabres with Dahlin, the Sabres without Dahlin. He is the player that we are locked in on tonight's game for. So let's look at some of the numbers for Rasmus Dahlin. And for this, we're going to be looking at expected goals for percentage with and without Dahlin before the injury and since the injury. And they obviously have not won a game. He got injured. He got injured. They immediately blew a 3-goal lead to Colorado, and they've not won a game since. They've lost 7 in a row since he went out. They had lost a couple in a row before he got injured, but again, maybe they were on their way to winning a hockey game if he doesn't get hurt. Before Dahlin's injury, the Sabres in expected goals for percentage, they were a little closer to middle of the pack. The Sabres, before that injury, were in expected goals for percentage 20th in the NHL. That is, again, like not great at all. 48.88% is where they were sitting in expected goals for percentage. That is in all situations. It includes their putrid power play that you could almost argue has been worse since Dahlin left the lineup. But again, close to middle of the pack, a little closer to middle of the pack. They were 3 points out of a playoff spot, and they had an 11-12-2 record before Dahlin got hurt. Again, 48.8%, 20th in the league in expected goals for percentage. Since the injury, the Sabres rank 30th in expected goals for percentage at 43.6%. A 5% drop in that number is a massive drop. They have not been as good of a team. They have not been as good of a possession team. And I am seeing way more shots from the point that we're just hoping hit something and find their way to the back of the net. Instead of Dahlin, who is often looking for more quality scoring opportunities when they're in the offensive zone. The Sabres' goal differential before Dahlin got hurt versus after Dahlin got hurt. The Sabres' goal differential before, +1. +1 with Dahlin on the season. Without him, since he got injured, -19. They are a different hockey team without him. Bo Byram, Owen Power. I was a little optimistic that the Sabres would be able to suffice not having Dahlin because Power had looked better this year, and I had liked Byram's season too. To me, the biggest disappointment comes from Power. Power, since Dahlin has left the lineup, has to me looked much worse. He is making mental mistakes. He is losing pucks in his feet. He is letting himself get bodied in front of the net. Like, to me, all the good that we were seeing from Power early in the year has been much more rocky. He hasn't been all bad. Like, you've had some really good plays too in the last 2 weeks, but it's been much more rocky, I think, since Dahlin went out, and he's been asked to kind of help carry the load as the number one defenseman, especially on the power play. And Power, to me, has not looked good on the power play, much worse than Dahlin on that front. So, Dahlin back in. We'll see how many minutes he plays tonight. We might get a good indication right away at what it's going to look like. So yesterday at practice, he was on a pairing with Bo Byram, which to me would indicate he goes right back to 25 minutes a night. But we'll see if they manage it at all, if he's somewhere around 20 instead of 25. We'll get, I think, a good signal as to what Dahlin is injury-wise very early on in this game against the Maple Leafs. What kind of matchups is he playing against Matthews, or are they protecting him a little bit more against one of the other lines? Again, we'll have to wait to see when the game begins, what that's going to look like. So that's what we got for the Sabres lineup. Dahlin back in. I think that could be a big deal. Lafferty back in, not as big a deal. And then Ryan McLeod is a game time decision. And if he doesn't play, my guess would be that Yuri Kulik would be the guy that comes out. Or excuse me, if he does play, Kulik would come out. But right now, my hunch would be that McLeod doesn't play. But I've been wrong on that before, so we'll see. All right, when we come back, quick word about Toronto. And I've got my sneaky parlay for tonight's game for Sabres and Leafs ahead here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. All right, when we get to my sneaky good parlay for tonight's game, Buffalo and Toronto, we will be heading over to our buddies over at FanDuel Sportsbook for all the odds, all the bunch of props that are available for tonight's game, whether that's a player prop or a team prop, if you want to see what the Sabres odds are to score a goal in the first 10 minutes or just get scored on in the first 10 minutes. If you're expecting another poor start, you get to check out the odds on that over at FanDuel Sportsbook. And it's a big football weekend. So college football and the National Football League, this is going to be one of the best football weekends of the entire calendar year. So get ready to tackle all the action on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook right now. Find something you like. New customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. So, check out one that you really like. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need. Place live bets in the NFL all in one place. When you get the hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same place where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Final segment here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Dahlin back in, and the Sabres are underdogs, but maybe not the biggest underdogs. In fact, since we put this, it is updated. That's how good we are over Locked On. We're updated to the second because these odds can shift sometimes minute to minute. The Sabres are underdogs tonight against the Toronto Maple Leafs. They are plus 118 on the money line. So if you're not a big bettor, that means you would be betting 100 to win 118. The Leafs are minus 142. So you'd have to bet 142 on the Leafs for the Sabres 142 to win 100 on the Leafs to win the game outright. Over-under in this game is set at 6.5, plus 102 on the over, minus 124 on the under. Toronto, again, they are playing really well as of late. They got Matthews back, and they have one of the most loaded lineups in the league. Mitch Marner has been off to a pretty good start in a contract year. Remember, he is going to be the subject of some trade rumors, I think, if we get closer to the deadline, and he has not signed yet. If not, then you're going to have a massive free agent bidding this coming summer. But for now, he's still sitting up there on that top line with Austin Matthews and Willie Nylander. The rest of their lineup, John Tavares, Matthew Nyes, and Max Pacioretty. Max Finneganoff's brother-in-law, sitting there on that second line for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Any chance we get a Finneganoff appearance tonight? Probably not. Actually, there's zero chance, I think. Max Domi on line 3 with Nicholas Robertson and Bobby McCann, David Camp, Steven Lorenz, and Pontus Holmberg. I've always liked the Leafs forward group. That has never been their question. But kind of like past years, the blue line and the goaltending, I just have big questions. And I think I almost always will as they continue to build a team like this. Morgan Riley, Connor Timmins, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who they signed in the offseason to an extension, Chris Tanev, Simon Benoit, and Jake McCabe. It's a little deeper than it's been in the past, but still doesn't look that impressive to me. And then Joseph Wall and Matt Murray. Matt Murray recalled to back up because Anthony Stolarz is on injured reserve. The Leafs for this season in goal, and I have not seen them announce a starting goaltender for tonight's game. Let me double check that because we did start the show a few minutes ago. And okay, Matt Murray. Matt Murray is playing tonight. Matt Murray, who once the Sabres traded for, remember, and then he told them he wasn't coming. That was out there that they were making that trade, and then it didn't happen. Matt Murray has not played for the Leafs yet this season. So this will be his season debut. Stolarz had been the guy. 17 games, leads the league in save percentage at .927. I don't expect that to hold up long term. And now he's injured, but a good start for Stolarz. And Joseph Wall's been pretty good, too, with a .918. So two pretty good goaltenders, but the Sabres are getting Matt Murray tonight. So with all that being said, You get Matt Murray in goal. Actually, is going to reinforce my parlay a little bit more here. And the Sabres' history against Toronto, Wembley fans filled the building, and Rasmus Dahlin returning to the lineup. I am going to bet the Sabres once again, twice in a row, and I promise this will be the last time I do it until they win a hockey game, because I did it earlier in the week, and they lost by 5 to Montreal. I'm taking the Sabres to win the hockey game. Plus 118. It's not even the best odds, but that almost indicates to me, I've said this in the past, I like lines that don't seem to make a lot of sense, because most people would look at that and say, Sabres plus 118 against the Leafs with basically an away game for them because of all the Toronto fans. I don't want any part of that. But those are the lines I like, because the books know you're going to react that way, and they have it there anyway. So they must like that. I'm going plus 118 for the Sabres. I am going to go under 6.5 goals for tonight's game, and I'm just going to go straight up Tage Thompson to score a goal. So plus 737, Thompson to score, under 6.5, Sabres to win the game on the money line. That's my sneaky parlay for tonight's game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Enjoy the game, and the next time we talk, we'll see if our days since a win counter has increased or if it's reset to 0. And if you're going to the game, best of luck. Best of luck. You're going to be in the minority. All right, it's going to do it for us today here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Check out Locked On Bills. Joe Marino got everything you need to get you ready for Bills and Patriots on Sunday. And then if you're looking for some fantasy hockey stuff going into the weekend, Steal and Flip got you covered over on Locked On Fantasy Hockey. We will talk to you on Monday here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.